What would women hate if they suddenly turned into men? Story 1. Women might dislike the lack of physical affection and emotional support men often experience from friends. That's why I try to make more female friends than male friends now, to be honest. I had male friends and they were insistent on knowing my problems because one day I was really sad and wanted to know my lore. So I forwarded all the messages that I sent to my other friend for venting, and he just kind of ignored it and said in school, "Hope you get better." My female friends support me emotionally far more and make me feel very loved. I have the opposite experience. My male bros try to help me with whatever they can. Female bros are basically, "Sucks, bro." I do have a more sensitive friend group overall, but there's a stark difference between how men want to help and how women just acknowledge your feelings. It's not bad, it's just sometimes I need some pointers, and women are very bad at that. Men have more difficulties actually talking about it if it involves themselves, but since I'm external, it's not as much of an issue. I saw the guy I'm dating casually kiss his best friend on the top of the head, and it was honestly such a green flag. He did roughly grab his head to do it, but my coworker did that to me the other day because she's nearly 6 feet tall and I'm 5'6", so the top of my head is right there to be fair. I think more people should act on their cuteness aggression with their friends in general. It's funny that men are the only beings not afforded unconditional love and affection, but rather based on what they can provide and or do for someone else while being expected to show unconditional love. And that seeking any form of help is seen as a weakness, and therapy is only for women bettering themselves. But as a man, it means you're unstable. If a woman cheats, it's because a man was doing something wrong to cause her to, and if a man cheats, it's because he's a horrible person who destroyed a perfect woman. I've always found this confusing. I think the male friends I have always come from scenes that encourage a lot of physicality. The boys in school were very huggy. Bromance was rife. Most of the ones I knew were on more of the rock and metal music scene, and when we meet new people in those circumstances, it's usually a handshake/hug. Similarly, the guys I know from the rave scene are on so much ecstasy, I suppose that they say how much they love each other all the time and use more X's at the end of their texts than any girl I know, and have to hold on to each other for dear life during their ket moments, lol. Uni had a lot of drunken nights, so people became huggy, even the lads, but I guess I meet guys primarily who have female friends and male friends, so it might make a difference. London was more hands-off. I certainly had no lack of hugs from men and women in the punk/squatter/couch surfer left politics scene, but I would say that I didn't see men hugging each other quite so much, and I found people shaking my hand a lot more often than at gigs. In my current D&D group, which is 4 dudes, me and a dudette, we start and end every session by hugging, and have done so since before we really knew each person. Apart from Connor, who doesn't like to be hugged, and when I've met any of their friends, it's been largely a hugathon from day one. I'm in the UK, and I'm always told that we are less physical and friendly than our US counterparts. I'm not doubting that loneliness or lack of touch is a thing, or that it's self-inflicted or anything. I've seen the stats. I just feel like if I was a guy with the same personality, whilst there are definitely times in life it would have been harder as a queer autistic alternative person, there's also still a good chance I'd have wound up in much the same communities. It might have been a bit later because I had a lot of internalized misogyny that might have bubbled into real misogyny rather than feminism and empathy for other struggles, and making friends from an ONS would be significantly less easy, but I don't know. My male friends who I have managed to get there. It's hard to make new friends, especially as adults, but it does seem like a lot of guys would benefit from shopping around different scenes to find more physical and emotional male friends. It can feel like a lot of guys don't really bother because they're waiting for a woman to come along at some point and do that. So they rather just keep around the guy they met when they were 5 and only talk about football with. Story 2. I love kids. They're freaking hilarious, and always doing adorable stuff, but I'm always mindful of looking like a pedo when I laugh or smile at some kid just vibing and having fun in the wild. I went to a friend's party last weekend, and there were a dozen kids ages 4 to 9, and they were hilarious and silly. I'm a woman and a mom, and I chased them around and swam with them and hugged them. I'm sorry that men can't do that. I never considered that fact. That really sucks. Suddenly I'm not as jealous of men. Chased them down? Swam with them? hugged them? Most men would never dare do any of that unless that child was directly related to them. That's so far out of the purview of possibilities, it's ridiculous. The most men would be allowed to do by social rules is play checkers or other board games, maybe Lego. There's no touching or close proximity needed there. I feel that. I'm 29. No wife, no kids, and my entire life animals and kids have always loved me. I often dissociate or go on depressive episodes, but when a little kid wants me to play with them, I forget life sucks for a bit. Like when my baby bro wants me to play trains, or my friend's daughter wants to do the Macho Man Randy Savage elbow drop on me. You best believe I'm fully committed. Just going to the park and pooping alone while listening to kids laugh on the slides makes me realize life's tough times haven't gotten to them yet. Children's innocence shows life doesn't always have to suck. As a woman, I see this a lot. My oldest is a hugger. He loves hugging people. I had to really work with him on asking first. I noticed the difference in how women and men react. When he wants to hug a woman, they just hug him back, no big deal. Anytime he wants to hug a guy, they always look at me to get permission. I always just say it's cool. I love the smile guys get when he hugs them. I have actually been yelled at by other women for allowing him to hug men. It's stupid. I understand that bad people exist, and yes, he could hug a predator, but women predators exist also, and no one worries he might hug one of them. I love that his hugs make people happy. I honestly think it is sad that something as simple as giving a guy a hug as a kid makes them worry they might be seen as a pervert. Story 3. My wife woke up mad one time because of a dream that she had. She said in her dream she was a guy, and she got mad because she couldn't figure out how to walk with her balls in the way. This is something I've spent an embarrassing amount of time wondering about. It genuinely stresses me out. It's one of those things that'll randomly pop into my mind throughout the day. I'll be walking around or sitting with my legs crossed or riding my bike, and suddenly my brain is like, what if you had balls? And I get uncomfortable just imagining what it would feel like. Awful. Story 4. There was a female writer who disguised herself as a guy for some time, I guess more than a year, and I'll tell you what, she hated a lot of things. She really hated how she was invisible to the other women, and how coldly people treated her. The book is Self-Made Man. I read this over a decade ago and really enjoyed it as a book. Found it very interesting. I really remember the part where she talked about trimming her hair and mixing it with glue to create hair mixtures for her body. Interesting read. But it's also weird that it directly contradicts some of the other things people here are saying. For example, people talk about how hard it is to make friends. I thought in that book she joins a bowling group and is like immediately taken in as a friend. But again, I haven't read it in a long time. I've heard women comment that men make friends everywhere. When outgoing guys make small talk and find common interests with strangers, it is a thing. But those aren't often true friendships. A bowling league, for example, can get quite close, but often those are just friends in the context of the bowling league. I've been close with fellow male coworkers, but never really outside of that context at work. It's not for lack of trying. Usually, it's just that we can never get schedules to line up right, and we always talk about going to get a beer sometime after work, and before you know it, one of you is signing a going away card to give before the other person moves on from that job. You never talk again, maybe once or twice. Deeper male friendships are usually from childhood, or at least from many years. They transcend context. Not every man even has these. Those are the kinds of friendships that most men miss. People don't stay around for their hometowns anymore. Third spaces are dying. Obligations pile up. We have plenty of acquaintances, but no friends. Because honestly, as a guy, it's really hard not to make friends with other guys. You just gotta know if they're the right kind of person to really have a chill conversation with. You can go to a bar, a pub, or even a club and strike up a conversation about anything. It's just some guys can get irate about simple things, and then it becomes a pooping contest. As a geeky outcast of a guy back in my early life, I've realized at a certain age what attitudes and personalities some men have. But all in all, one thing I learned is speaking sports to another guy makes it very easy to become friends with them. Like the bowling thing you mentioned. I remember going to a student bar at my uni when I knew absolutely no one. I just latched onto a bunch doing a bar crawl because I knew a little bit about golf. The next thing you know, I was at the fourth bar doing shots with 2 other guys because I happened to know a bit about sports. I wouldn't mind, I freaking hate sports, but for a lot of them, it's their bread and butter, you know? Sometimes a friend group of women will have one really fat and unattractive member. She has to sit there and listen to her more attractive friends complain about getting too much male attention or complain that they can't find a boyfriend, while spouting off her absurd requirements. And the unattractive one has to sit there and grin and bear it because if she says anything or tells them that they actually have it amazing, then it becomes a giant problem. Story 5. Do you know how women around 50 explain that they have become invisible? They say nobody is even nice or friendly or personal or wants to talk to them. That's how most men spend their entire lives. I read something once about how men never get random compliments the way women do, so I, as a middle-aged woman, started randomly complimenting guys. I'm dead certain that in the last 3 years I've given 2 random guys one of their lifetime favorite compliments. You can see it happen. I noticed this a lot after turning 30 and starting to lose my youth. 99% of women I see look up in the opposite direction when they walk by me now. And then if you do get a little attention, you have to try and understand if they like you or are just being nice. I just assume women are being nice now, probably missing out on many opportunities for affection because of this. I used to always make jokes about how a lot of these women's worst nightmare, being invisible, is how 99% of men are treated their entire lives. Of course, instead of having any insight and going, wow, I just experienced something that people do every day, now I have a better understanding of them, they just throw a pity party. TBF, that's most people who do the pity party, not certain to one gender or the other. Maybe it's because I'm from another country, but handsome men get a lot of attention and compliments from women all the time in my city. I see beautiful people making friends right in the middle of the street, saying each other compliments, just striking up conversations out of nowhere. I think what you speak of is not male versus female, it's a pretty privilege, and it applies to both sexes in my experience. I have 2 male colleagues. The handsome one is always met with smiles from women. He's often being complimented, and people of all genders act very relaxed and friendly with him, while another, who's not a looker, always gets strictly professional behavior. Story 6. The amount of effort it takes to not be perceived as a creep or perv, or the lack of benefit of the doubt. One example happened just the other day. At the train station, I sat by myself. No one else there yet, as I was early and it was just a quiet station. I'm watching crap on my phone with my prescription sunglasses. Excuse me, what do you think you're doing? I look up and some woman is standing and staring at me. Huh? What? I'm confused as I've been pulled out of my little world. Why are you staring? And were you taking photos? I want to see your phone. Huh? I look around and in front of me are 3 very young teens in thong bikinis squatting down waiting for the train, and I realize what the women must have been thinking. I'm autistic and struggle with public confrontation at the best of times. All my rights to privacy go out the window now. If I argue, she will call the police, and if I walk away, I look guilty as the station is filling up. More people are now staring at me, and this woman shouting at me. I have to show her my recent photos, and she accuses me of using another app. The train then pulls up, and I tell her to piss off, and she starts screaming pedo. I had to get off that train and wait for the next, as she was following me and shouting perv and pedo. I was lucky I didn't get my head kicked in thanks to her. Can you imagine what it feels like to have 50 odd people giving you disgusted and threatening looks, thanks to a crap set of circumstances? I'm very sorry this happened to you. What an absolutely crappy, unfortunate experience. I'd like to think I would have argued strongly that I was just waiting for a freaking train and didn't ask for underage ass near me while I read the news on my phone. But when you're immediately being accused of something, you didn't even notice the context. That's incredibly difficult. That woman sucks hard. I'm not sure if you're from a place where police are unlikely to shoot you on sight, but if they actually can be trusted to do basic mediating, I'd probably try to leverage that. A few times I got confronted in this kind of situation. I suggested after a heavy sigh and deathly tired stare that I could call the coppers for them, and we could sort it out properly since hell would freeze over before I handed over my phone, or whatever they wanted at the moment, to some dumb idiots. Definitely not likely to get shot, very likely to have it marked permanently on my record, very likely to have my phone seized and searched, very likely to end up having people whip out their phones and film me dealing with the coppers, then post it online with a bad caption. Not to sound like a dick, but this is one of the problems with my autism too. Because my vibes are naturally off, coppers are automatically more suspicious of me and will more than likely side with her than me. I could be wrong, and they could have defended me. But with the past experience with coppers, it doesn't feel likely. The local police station to that station is also 30 to 45 minutes away, which means longer with the woman screaming at me and more chance of me getting my head kicked in by people reacting to her, and more chance of it being filmed. Even then, if I put up with that risk and everything gets proven false, nobody's going to be filming and posting "he is innocent." So many stories of Karens accusing innocent men of being pedos. Some years ago, I read a Reddit story of a crazy Karen who was pulling a father's screaming daughter away from him, screaming, "Help, help, pedophile." The man actually punched out the lady. Cops, of course, tried arresting the man until the daughter, and luckily a much older woman who witnessed it backed up the father's story that his daughter was being kidnapped. The end result, she had severe facial trauma followed by jail time. Heartwarming. Story 7. People assume you're violent and about to harass them in some way, or people who expect you to be strong and stoic emotionally at all times. I wouldn't like to have people scared of me. I'm a semi-invisible old lady, and it is great. I can interact with anyone. I don't mean to gloat. I try to give men lots of compliments, and I'm deeply grateful when any of you guys help me with a heavy load. Hang tough, good sir. I had an older, maybe 75-plus woman give me a compliment on my shirt while standing in line the other day. I'm half that age and was absolutely flattered. We chatted for a few minutes while in line, instead of me flicking through my phone as I otherwise would have done. Blah. Made my day. I, for one, appreciate your compliments. I kind of figured that men giving each other compliments might be weird for them, thanks to all who went after Oscar Wilde, and young women giving men compliments doesn't work. So it is up to us old ladies to do this. Every time one of you says something about how much it helps, I resolve to step up my old lady giving compliments game. And thanks again to everyone who opens the jar, hefts the luggage into the overhead compartment, and/or hauls something unwieldy from Home Depot to my car. There's only so much any of us can do. I keep trying to do my best. One thing to note, older women probably feel safer giving compliments, knowing the man won't take it as interest and assume she's trying to pick him up. Same reason I feel safe doing it. Young, but not cute, so they won't act any different. They'll just appreciate it and move on. With hot girls, many men tend to see it as what they want, rather than what it is. Which is, I know, also a result of not getting many compliments in the first place. Partially, but it's also a reason for it. Kind of a tough problem because it perpetuates itself in that way. It's like nice comments are rare for women to give men because they often are a bit too readily read romantic interest into them, so women don't want to give the wrong signal, which in turn keeps it so that it's rare for them to give them. We need to simultaneously normalize complimenting men and not read anything into compliments to make it easier to give more freely. In the meantime, I'll try to give as many as I can whenever I know there's no way it's going to be mistaken as attraction. So like pretty much all the time, but I imagine you can see why it's not the case for all women. Yeah, this one upsets me a lot. I totally understand why women would feel uneasy around men, but it's still kind of dehumanizing when you see women cross the road to avoid you, or elect to stand up on public transport, even when there's a free seat next to you. I'm 6'4", 260 with a beard, so I'm probably more intimidating than most, and yeah, it really sucks knowing that most women have a preconceived idea that I'm violent or a rapist or something. Story 8. Being constantly aware that you could be seen as a threat. I love kids, particularly babies, and kids and babies love me despite the fact that I'm a big, bald dude with a beard. However, I'm also super conscious that moms can't be too careful, so anytime I'm in a store or something, I go out of my way to be as unimposing as possible. I'll go as far as to purposely avoid an aisle if I see a mom with her kid on it that I saw a few minutes earlier, because I don't want her to think, "Is that guy following me?" That last sentence is making me pause. I'm female and have often remarked to myself how many times I cross paths with the same people in the grocery store as we peruse the aisles. Never thought anything more of it. I've never worried about seeming creepy. But I can now see how that's something you as a guy might feel like you have to concern yourself with. I'm having a moment in your shoes. It's a really weird experience. It's often talked about how women have to be hyper-vigilant of potential threats, but less talked about on the flip side is men often having to be hyper-vigilant of being perceived as a threat, which is kind of a thing. It's so real as a dude in Target or the grocery store, constantly getting the little head turned back, quick clocking of you that women often do to monitor your location and actions. It's like, okay, well, she's clocked me 3 times and it's obviously a concern that I might be following her. I'll go to the dairy section and then come back to get chips later, since she's going down that aisle. You can't just say, hey, I'm not a threat. You either have to leave that person's presence or make them feel safe, or actively do something noticeable that demonstrates you're harmless. And as a gay guy, the shopping experience is completely different depending on how I'm presenting, dressed, or if they hear my voice. Not saying either sex's side of the experience is worse. The guy side is just a weird position to be in sometimes. A few years ago, I was in the bathroom at the bowling alley washing my hands when a kid, maybe 6 years old, asked if I could help him with closing up his pants because he had trouble with the buttons. I told him to go to his parents because if I had helped him and someone had come in, I would have no possible way to explain myself out of that situation. I was at a park last week with my wife, and kids and I really needed to poop. So I started bolting towards the concession area that was like a quarter mile away down the path. As I was moving quickly, I came upon an older woman just walking. Approaching her from behind, I was super aware that a now 6-foot dude was storming towards her, and she even looked back a few times at the sound of my footfalls. I felt horrible. I know she was panicking. I gave her a 15-foot berth walking through the grass to try to ease her. Just wanted the bathroom, lady. There was this one time late at night when I decided to go for a walk around my neighborhood. It looked like it might rain and was a little chilly, so I had a jacket with my hood pulled up. Anyway, I'm walking down the street, and ahead of me is this woman, walking alone. I pay her no mind. She turns her head around to look at me twice, and she quickens her pace after a bit. I look around at my back the second time she does, because now I'm starting to freak out. I don't see anything, but I quicken my pace anyway since my place is just a block away. I'm moving slightly faster than her, so I'm about to catch up. Just as I'm about to ask her what's bothering her, she turns her head. And this time she starts booking it. I turn my head. I don't see anything, but decide to sprint towards my house just in case. I quickly ran inside and locked my door. Never saw her again on a late night walk. Story 9. I hear a lot of trans men complaining about loneliness. It takes a lot of effort to make and keep friends as you get older, and as a guy, you really won't get much sympathy at all from society when you're going through hard times. Yeah, I always think of that one guy who tried to go to domestic abuse groups and was kicked out repeatedly for being a guy, then eventually tried to start his own and nobody cared. Mocking continued, so he killed himself. I might have some details off, but that's the basic story. Earl Silverman, I believe his name was, and it's frankly even worse than what you're outlining here. When he tried to start his own shelter, the shelters he tried to go to before, the ones that denied him entry, campaigned against him, resulting in his shelter being denied the funding that everyone else was given freely. His shelter had to close down. Throughout his adult life, he was ridiculed for being a victim of domestic abuse until he couldn't take it anymore and took his own life. Came here to say the same exact thing. It also plugs the story of Nora Vincent, a writer who went undercover as a man for a book. Google her. She became so distraught by her experience as a man, particularly the loneliness you mentioned, that she had a psychotic break and eventually killed herself. The world is unkind to both genders, so I don't want to get into who has it worse between men and women. We're all dealing with different challenges in our society, but men certainly don't have it any easier. I have 0 friends, and I've tricked myself into hating friends and the idea of friends. I don't even try anymore. Everything I go through myself. I'm so closed off emotionally that I couldn't even talk to a therapist. I even tried and went to several, but it's just ingrained in me as, well, it is what it is, or screw it, who cares, because exactly no one does. I, male, was in a lonely spot about 12 years ago. New city with no friends, ex lived 4 hours away. It was a tough couple of years. I didn't realize for many years how depressed I had been, and did not realize my coping mechanism had been calling my 2 closest friends every day or so, and talking for a bit. We didn't talk about feelings, but just about what was going on, even though nothing much had changed day to day. It probably would have been easier had we been talking about feelings. Between them and my cats, I'm not sure how I would have gotten in without them. Story 10. A lot of women aren't familiar with being looked at as a danger, a threat, or a creeper. Yet it seems that most of my fellow penis havers learned that feeling at some point, regardless of how well they fit those descriptions. I mean, my guess is, if you're tall or big and a guy, you've likely had a concerned mother pull their child closer, or a small woman pull her belongings closer, which is fair. We're all unknowns to each other on the street, but it's weird when it happens. I do my best not to act like that around men, especially any who people in society might perceive as more of a danger, tattooed, pierced, bearded, wearing a turban, person of color, etc. Because I do understand that there are people who react like that. I just try to smile and nod politely to everyone when I can, unless they're trying to sell me something. Then I hurry past them because no, I'm not signing up for anything, leave me alone. Not for nothing, but I'm a small woman who also acted normal around men to purposefully help them feel more comfortable, because I know the vast majority of men aren't out to hurt people. I got punched in the face by a random stranger while sitting outside of a restaurant. I felt like a complete idiot because I had a slightly bad feeling about him, but I made myself keep hanging by the railing. Seriously bad move. While I still am mostly friendly with strangers, I 100% listen to every tingle in my gut now, even if I might be wrong. Sorry if I get it wrong sometimes, guys. I got a cervical concussion from my efforts, and I can't make that mistake again. I don't know what I'm saying here other than, it's good to be friendly, but there are understandable limits. I wished we lived in a world where that was something women could safely do. I used to be like that, completely unconcerned and generally friendly. It took being followed twice, and once almost the entire way home for me to stop. All while I was clearly underage. I ended up having to jump a fence and hide in my neighbor's garden until the guy left the street, giving the elderly man a massive shock when he came out the back. Not gonna risk my safety again. If I'm passing by someone at night, I'd rather have more distance in case I need to run again. Story 11. Being more disposable. Having fewer people or no one care about you. The whole expression, women and children first, during emergencies is just a more polite way of saying literally anyone who isn't a man. Our lives are literally viewed as less worthy of saving. Or when they report casualties from Gaza or Ukraine, they will call out casualties, but then for emphasis will point out how many women and children, because that's worse than just killing men, obviously. Or hell, remember in 2014, when Boko Haram in Nigeria raided a school and kidnapped 250 teenage girls into slavery? It was a major international story. Michelle Obama went on TV as part of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. It was a horrible tragedy. If you do remember that, you probably don't recall that in the same raid there were nearly 2 times as many school boys who were victimized, but they were all tortured and killed. You probably don't remember because it was barely mentioned in the news reporting. That was an eye-opener for me. 500 to 600 school boys got tortured and murdered, and 250 school girls got kidnapped. The girls' kidnapping is considered a major humanitarian crisis and has been a global news story for weeks. Nobody even mentions or cares about the boys who were murdered. They don't even get a sentence in one article. Yeah, I've always wondered why they don't include men in that figure. However, in the context of war, I think in many cases there is a false assumption that all men must be soldiers, terrorists, and thus it doesn't matter if they die. It puts down the value of men's lives while feigning care for humanity, all by representing the inaccurate, non-enemy death count. I am a little confused about your second point though, because the Boko Haram raid you referenced was an all-girls school. Story 12. The loneliness. Going somewhere alone and having ladies stare at me like an axe murderer for walking behind them, being grouped in with psychopaths and being told they'd rather be in the woods with a bear. I worked for 7 years in psych nursing with kids and teens. We had 3 false allegations, and all 3 of the young ladies admitted to fabricating it. I wanted to work with kids and teens because that was such a troubled time for me, but I saw the writing on the wall and left a field I loved so much. I am so sorry this happened to you. As a woman, I can never relax around men I don't know. I was sexually assaulted when I was a teenager by an older guy and had my fair share of really bad experiences with men. Like a delivery guy forcing his way into my space and men following me home. I had a stalker who made me move towns, delete all of my social media, and change numbers. I'm 32 now and have learned to protect myself, but part of that is really to never reciprocate contact with a stranger and stay away from men. I find it sad, but it is hard to differentiate who will be a potential threat and who won't be. I have some male friends in my friend circle, and they are absolutely amazing. I know not all men are like that, but I had such terribly violent experiences that happened so randomly that it's difficult to trust. I'm sharing this with you for some perspective. A few assholes ruin it for the majority of nice people. Sorry that this is happening to you. I've actually related to this one recently. I got a new job and now use a parking garage for work, and there are a lot of women walking alone through there before I get to head in. At this point, I start to recognize them going in at the same time each day, so I've timed my exit between one walking out and another's arrival. That way we don't meet at the stairwell together. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.